All right, let's dive into our first topic. We're going to be discussing English pronouns, their definitions, types, and how they can be used to avoid repetition in both speech and writing. So, what exactly is a pronoun? Well, quite simply, a pronoun is a word that we use instead of a noun or a noun phrase. These little words are like the unsung heroes of the English language. They help us avoid sounding like a broken record, repeating the same nouns over and over again. There are different types of pronouns in English, and each type has its own specific use. First up, we have personal pronouns, which are probably the ones you're most familiar with. These include words like he, she, it, we, and they. These pronouns are used to represent people or things. For example, instead of saying, John is a teacher, John loves his job, we can say, John is a teacher. He loves his job. Next, we have possessive pronouns, like mine, your, his, her, its, ours, and theirs. These pronouns indicate ownership or possession. For instance, rather than saying, that is the car of John, we would say, that is John's car, or that car is his. There are also reflexive pronouns, such as myself, yourself, herself, ourselves, and themselves. These are used when the subject and the object of the sentence are the same. For example, I taught myself to play the guitar. We can't forget about relative pronouns like who, whom, whose, which, and that. These pronouns are used to connect clauses or phrases. An example of this would be, the woman who lives next door is a doctor. Lastly, we have indefinite pronouns. These include words like someone, anyone, everyone, nobody, and everything. These pronouns do not refer to any specific person or thing. For instance, someone left their bag on the bus. Now you might be thinking, that's a lot of types of pronouns. And you're right. But don't worry, with practice, understanding and using these pronouns becomes second nature. They truly are essential tools in the English language, helping us express our thoughts more concisely and dynamically. So, let's remember to appreciate these little words and use them correctly to avoid repetition and make our speech and writing smoother. After all, who wants to sound like a parrot, right? Let's move on to our next topic. Moving right along, let's tackle our next topic. Using English prepositions correctly in various contexts to craft clear and dynamic sentences. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is a preposition? In its simplest form, a preposition is a word that shows the relationship of a noun or pronoun to another word in a sentence. These little words can indicate location, time, direction, cause, and manner. Some common prepositions you may already know include in, on, at, from, to, of, with. Now, let's explore how to use these prepositions in different contexts. Shall we? Firstly, we have prepositions of time. These include words like at, on, and in. For instance, we use at for precise times, like I'll meet you at 5 p.m. Like on is used for days and dates. I was born on the 4th of July. And in is used for longer periods, like months, years, seasons, or parts of the day. I usually go skiing in December, or I prefer to study in the morning. Next, we have prepositions of place and direction. For example, in is used for enclosed spaces. The cat is in a box. On is for surfaces. The book is on the table. And at for specific points. Prepositions can also show cause and manner. For example, she was late because of the traffic. Or, he went to the party with his friends. One important thing to remember is that prepositions are often used in set phrases or idioms, so their meaning might not always be literal. For instance, she's head over heels in love doesn't mean someone is physically tumbling. Prepositions can be tricky, but they're a crucial tool in the English language. They help us provide additional details and context to our sentences, making them more dynamic and clear. So remember, practice makes perfect. The more you use prepositions in your everyday speech and writing, the more natural they'll start to feel. Now, let's move on to our next topic. All right, it's time to delve into the nitty-gritty of grammar. Pronoun antecedent agreement. Now, this may sound like a mouthful, but it's actually pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. First, let's break down the terms. An antecedent is simply the noun that a pronoun is replacing or referring to. For example, in the sentence, John lost his keys. John is the antecedent, and his is the pronoun. The rule of pronoun antecedent agreement is that the pronoun must agree in number and gender with its antecedent. This means that if the antecedent is singular, the pronoun must be singular. If the antecedent is plural, the pronoun must be plural. Similarly, if the antecedent is male, the pronoun should be male, and so on. For example, we wouldn't say the dog was chasing their tail, because dog is singular. Instead, we'd say the dog was chasing its tail. Likewise, we wouldn't say the boys are proud of her work, because boys is plural and male. Instead, we'd say the boys are proud of their work. In recent years, the use of they as a singular pronoun has become accepted in cases where the gender and the antecedent is unknown or irrelevant. Like if someone calls, tell them I'll be back soon. However, it's important to be consistent. If you start with they as a singular pronoun in one sentence, continue to use they in the same way throughout your discussion. And that's essentially the rule of pronoun antecedent agreement in a nutshell. It might seem a bit intricate at first, but trust me, with practice, it becomes second nature. And remember, it's all about making our English more accurate and understandable. Let's move on to our next topic. Now, we're going to shift our focus to prepositional phrases and how mastering their use can add more detail and complexity to your English sentences. So, a quick refresher. A prepositional phrase is a group of words that begins with a preposition and ends with the noun or pronoun, which is known as the object of the preposition. Examples of prepositional phrases are on the table, in the garden, at the end of the day, with great enthusiasm. You get the idea. These little phrases can add a lot of information to a sentence. They can tell us where something happened, when it happened, how it happened, and even why it happened. Let's look at some examples. If I say, I live in New York, the prepositional phrase in New York tells you where I live. Or if I say, she's arriving on Monday, here, on Monday, tells you when she's arriving. Prepositional phrases can also describe a noun. For instance, the man with the blue hat is my uncle. In this case, with the blue hat describes which man I'm talking about. And they can add detail to verbs too. For example, she sings with a beautiful voice. Here, with a beautiful voice, tells you how she sings. Using prepositional phrases effectively can make your English sound more fluent. But remember, it's important not to overdo it. Too many prepositional phrases in one sentence can make it confusing and hard to follow. As with all things in life, balance is key. So, take the time to experiment with prepositional phrases in your speech and writing. You'll find that they can add a lot of richness and detail to your English. Now let's move on to our final topic. Now let's tackle the final topic in our discussion: identifying common mistakes and misconceptions related to the usage of English pronouns and prepositions and how to avoid them. There are several common errors that people often make when using pronouns. One of the most frequent is using the wrong type of pronoun. For instance, using I instead of me, as in he gave the book to my friend and I. It should actually be he gave the book to my friend and me. Another common mistake is not ensuring agreement between the pronoun and its antecedent. Remember, they must agree in number and gender, as we discussed earlier. So saying each person must do their best is incorrect because each person is singular, while there is plural. The correct sentence would be, each person must do his or her best. Now, let's talk about prepositions. The common error is ending a sentence with a preposition, like, who are you going with? While this is widely accepted in informal spoken English, it's generally considered incorrect in formal written English. The correct version would be, with whom are you going? Though admittedly, it does sound rather old-fashioned. Another common mistake is using the wrong preposition in a set phrase or idiom. For example, it's interested in, not interested on, and good at, not good in. Prepositions can be tricky because their use often doesn't follow a logical rule. It's more about what sounds right, which can vary depending on regional dialects and personal preference. So, how can you avoid these mistakes? Well, practice, of course, but also don't be afraid to ask for help or look things up if you're not sure. There are plenty of resources out there, like grammar books and online language forums, where you can find answers to your questions. And remember, everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language. It's all part of the process. So don't get discouraged. Keep practicing, keep learning, and you'll keep improving. That's all for this topic. But I hope this discussion has been helpful. Keep going. You're doing great.